have our first patient coming into the clinic. 3-day-old infant, mom is 25. She is adamant about breastfeeding. And I asked the resident, so what do we do to support her? What are we going to tell her? You want to stand up? I probably do. I move a lot. So we're asking the residents, what do you do? What are we going to tell this mom? How do we support her? And this is what I get. Like literally blinks. What do you tell her? And you would think it's intuitive. A lot of people think this is intuitive, but it's not at all. So the work is important for us to train our medical professionals and our residents on how do we support these moms? How do we support their goals? So I want to share with you a little bit today about what we're doing at Morehouse School of Medicine as far as training our residents in breastfeeding medicine. So objectives today will be to have a brief discussion about the historical background of breastfeeding rotation, to identify critical areas of breastfeeding education for our resident physicians, and then also recognize the usefulness of enhanced breastfeeding knowledge during and beyond pediatric residency training. So as I said, this is not intuitive information. So the AAP recognized this a couple of years ago and developed a curriculum to help train pediatric physicians on what to do to support our breastfeeding families. They received some funding from the CDC, and the objectives of this curriculum was to increase the availability and accessibility of the medical provider to education and training. Also, we're going to improve the capacity of medical practitioners to facilitate the safe implementation of evidence-based maternity care practices, as well as to promote continuity of breastfeeding related to care of the community. So we all understand why breastfeeding is important, but we need the education to be able to do so effectively. So the curriculum is composed of these 5 topics, and the desire is to help to develop confidence and the skills to be able to train our residents. So medical knowledge, we need to be able to understand the anatomy of the breast, understand the physiology of lactogenesis, also to be able to be up to date on the most current recommendations for breastfeeding. What challenges do we face with our families, especially the ones in our community that I'll talk about a little bit later. Patient care, so this is our direct patient care. When the parent comes into the office and they're struggling, what do you do? When we don't have an appropriate latch, what do we do? How do we talk to our patients? Culturally sensitive care. Systems-based practice. So this is our communication with other healthcare professionals, laypersons, members of the community, how to work as an interactive and interpersonal team. We have our practice-based learning. So our job is to educate ourselves, but then once we educate ourselves, we have to educate others. So that's that component. And then lastly, self-explanatory interpersonal communication skills. Do we know how to talk to people? Which is all it's about. Sometimes our medical students and our residents can be very book smart, but we can't really talk to people. And this is an important part of our training. So why are we using this curriculum? Breastfeeding is the best health for our infants and mothers. We all know this. And we see that more mothers are choosing to breastfeed now, so we need to have the skills to be able to support them. Next, we understand that if we're able to handle any of these issues, that it creates a stronger patient and doctor bond, and therefore enhances our outcomes, which is really what this is all about. And then lastly, of course, we want to reduce healthcare disparities for our infants and our mothers. All right, so Morehouse Pediatric Residency Training Program. This is where I'm coming from. I'm really passionate about our mission, and all of the residents and physicians who come to Morehouse usually talk about the mission. So why do we exist? We want to improve the health and well-being of individuals and communities, increase the diversity of the health profession. So we are creating physicians of color, scientists of color. I know someone mentioned earlier, sometimes you can't be what you can't see, and I think it's really important for us to have that representation. So we're all about that at Morehouse. We address primary health care through programs in education and research and service, and our emphasis is on people of color, underserved, rural populations, urban populations in Georgia, in the nation, and in the world. So as I mentioned, we're located in the heart of Atlanta, Georgia. We're established in the year 2000, so we just celebrated our 20th graduation. Our program is a 3-year program, so we have 20 years of graduation, which is very exciting for us. The students at the top are our class of 2023 graduates who will be going out into general practice as well as GI fellowship next year. So we're really proud of them. Our purpose is to train, as I said, physicians who serve in marginalized and underserved populations. One thing that makes Morehouse unique is that we are the only pediatric residency program associated with a historically Black college and university. So that is Morehouse, which you're all familiar with. So that makes us very unique, and we are very proud of that. We have 6 categorical positions each year, so what that means is each year we interview several medical students, but we only take 6, so we're considered a very small program. So we have a total of 18 residents throughout the 3 years of residency. And then lastly, we are accredited by the Accreditation Council of Graduate Medical Education. So our clinical affiliates are Morehouse School of Medicine, of course. We're also affiliated with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, which is where all of our residents complete their clinical training. We have 3 campuses across Atlanta. The one that you see here is Hugh Spalding, which is in the heart of downtown, and it's attached to Grady Healthcare System, which is also one of our clinical affiliates. And then lastly, our residents do train at Emory Decatur Hospital, and they get some of their breastfeeding training there at the term nursery. These are the 4 sites that we do most of our clinical. All right, so while we're here, the breastfeeding nutrition elective. So this elective began, Dr. Bud can help me out here. It began in the 2018-2019 academic year. So this was a big year for us. We were transitioning leadership. We were switching over program directors, and one of the 3rd-year residents had an interest in becoming a better pediatrician, honestly. She wanted to learn how to support our families. And I'll talk about her a little bit more through this talk, but this was her idea initially. And then Dr. Lynn Gardner, who is our current program director, also now chair of our pediatric department, she was transitioning into her new role as program director. And she desired to teach our pediatricians about how to feed a child, like what is nutrition? That's another thing that seems very intuitive, but you'll be surprised, it's really not. And parents have all these questions, and as the physician, you're expected to know everything. So she's like, well, let's come up with a rotation that gives the foundational knowledge about how to nourish our children, and then also kind of spark this idea of breastfeeding, like what do we do, how do we support? And then now we have this rotation that is comprehensive and it's available to all of our residents who have interest. So our rotation structure, our current course director is Dr. Marche Smith. So she is the 3rd-year resident that I referenced on the previous slide. And she is now graduated, 5 years now, or 4 years now, and has now become the course director of her rotation, which is amazing. We have a breastfeeding component, which is led by Dr. Kim-Marie Bugg. We also have the nutrition component, that is led by Ms. Bailey Koch, who is our dietitian. And the rotation takes place over 3 to 4 weeks. 4 weeks if the resident does not have vacation. Say yay! If the resident does not have vacation, otherwise it is a 3-week rotation. It consists of in-person and virtual sessions. So this part has changed over 5 years. Initially, the rotation was mostly in person, and then we had a pandemic and transitioned to mostly virtual sessions, but our residents are able to go to the lactation clinic and as well as the nutrition clinic. And they're also required to complete some independent studies. So some of those may be modules, videos, readings. They're also required to interview breastfeeding moms and give their experience of, what their stories are, what they learned, and how that will help to support them as medical trainees. And then lastly, once they go through all of this, they're still required to do their weekly didactics, as well as their regular continuity clinics, which they do see patients and breastfeeding moms during those clinics as well. So I'll quickly run through the objectives of the rotation, and you'll notice that most of these objectives do address the topics that the AAP curriculum described earlier. So the resident should be able to state the many benefits of breastfeeding. We already talked about those, the benefits to the parent, to the baby, as well as to the mom. Also, they should be able to understand basic breastfeeding management. They should demonstrate the importance of direct patient care, which we also talked about in that curriculum topic. And then for the nutrition, this is the support of women's decision to breastfeed. This is probably one of my favorite ones to go through with the residents, because I think as new physicians, we can sometimes do a lot of assuming. And it is really important to understand what your family's goals are and to be able to support them in their goals, not what you think they want to do. So this is a really important point. And then for the nutrition component, understanding common nutritional challenges, particularly in our complex medical kids. Bailey Koch, the nutritionist, she works at a center called GI Care for Kids, which she sees many complex patients and addresses their nutritional needs. And then lastly, discussing the nutritional needs in the primary care setting versus the subspecialty, because they do have different needs. All right, on to the good part. So when I found out I was doing this talk, I wanted to get an idea of what our residents thought. So Dr. Bug, this is for you. What do our residents think about this rotation? Are we meeting our goals? So over the 5 years that we've been doing this rotation, we've had 21 residents to sign up. For the survey, 17 of those residents, these are former and current residents, participated in the survey, so we had an 81% participation rate. And those residents or attendings now were represented across 4 specialties. So most of our residents are general practitioners, either working in the outpatient primary care clinic or in the inpatient setting. I know, it's almost over. It's all day, right? All day. We have a few residents who are either in the emergency medicine setting or the urgent care. We have one GI fellow, that was the young man who was on the slide of the graduates, and then we have one resident who's also going into psychiatry. So those are the specialties that are represented across the survey. So the first question is, what year did you or will you complete residency? So I just kind of wanted to know whether they were a former or current resident. So the majority is pretty split in half. If you look 2023, this year, those are our graduates. Those were the most who participated. As you can see, out of the 6 residents of the 2023 class, all of them took the rotation except for one. And this is by choice. They chose to take this rotation. And then 2019, so that was Dr. Marche Smith. She was the only resident to take the rotation during that time, but we've had an increase in interest over the years. What year did you complete the rotation? So the majority of the residents do take this rotation during their intern year. Dr. Bug, our new interns are coming in on July 1st. I have already signed up 4 out of the 6 for their intern year. So we have significant interest this year as well. So most of them take it during their intern year, and it's only a one-time elective. So gauging level of interest, what level of interest did you have in the breastfeeding rotation or learning about breastfeeding prior to the rotation? So over 88% had either strong or some interest in breastfeeding. Now you have that one person, it's always one, who had 0 interest in learning about breastfeeding. Do you know who that is, Dr. Bug? You guess? I know you know who it is. But this person, it was this person's last resort rotation because all the other ones did not come through. But either way, this person did learn something, so that's all that matters, right? But thankfully, nobody had a decrease in interest afterwards. A large majority had an increased interest, 82%, after completing their rotation. So this question was really important, the impact of the virtual experience. As I mentioned, at the beginning, we were all in person, and then pandemic hit, we completely switched to virtual. So did you participate virtually or in person? Almost half and half. So some of these individuals were both, so I should have probably asked, did you do one or both? But we had a pretty mixed bag of in-person and virtual, so we have some experiences from both, which is great. So this is the good part really here. Impact of the virtual experience. If virtual, how did it affect you? So this person, not at all. They were fine. Everything was okay. They were able to attend meetings and that was fine. So this person spoke specifically about the nutrition portion. They basically said that telehealth versus sitting in the office didn't really matter. They got the same experience, but for breastfeeding, they feel like they could have had more in-person sessions. They wish they had more in-person sessions. The interpersonal component was missing. They weren't able to interact with mothers directly, and they were less patients coming into the clinic, so they felt like it affected them a bit negatively. Less robust experience. Significant drop in patient experience. So this person had more of a positive experience. They had more time to read. So there were a lot of different readings during the virtual component. And they had a few in-person sessions in the Rose Clinic, and they thought it was very helpful for them. I think this impacted my experience, and then success with breastfeeding for the moms. I'm not quite sure what they mean, but it almost sounds like, would you say more of a negative experience with the success of breastfeeding during a virtual experience? I'm not sure what they meant by that. And they also wanted more hands-on experience. Getting to learn about different styles and techniques of breastfeeding at my own pace. So this person appreciated being able to read at their own pace. Practice in person with the ladies at Rose really made it a great experience. And that comment was echoed a lot throughout this survey. Good to see how Rose utilized technology and was still able to provide breastfeeding support. Would have been nice to visit the organization and interact with the staff and moms in person. So moving on to our utility post-training. How will you utilize the skills you learned during the rotation in your practice post-training? So one is currently utilizing them as an attending. She helps parents with feeding, positions, infant alignment, and latch. This also gave her resources for referrals and teaching her when to refer. She's proud parents. As a now IBCLC, I have more comprehensive approach to breastfeeding, which is amazing. You know who that is, Dr. Bud. All right, so I feel more confident. That was one of the others that was echoed a lot. More confidence in helping women achieve proper latch and do adequate troubleshooting until I can find a lactation expert to help. More confidence. I feel like more of an advocate for breastfeeding newborns. I will make sure to ask more detailed questions. They hate when we tell them to do that, but here we go. Be sure to listen to parents and their goals. That was one of mine. Listen to their parents and their goals and provide whatever support that I can for their needs. So this is one of my favorite comments. During the time I was breastfeeding my daughter, and I got a lot of insight on ways to help improve our relationship. This person said they can advocate more for breastfeeding moms, and it gave me the momentum to continue my breastfeeding journey. So areas for improvement. In what ways do you think the rotation can be improved? So this was probably said about 7 times. More exposure to the Rose site. So Rose, you're making an impact on our residents. I want you to know. And they truly desire your experience and your expertise. So thank you for that. More hands-on experience. So this person was content. I found it to be well balanced with enough clinical volume and learning modules. I wish the rotation was longer, so we can't do that. But we do appreciate the sentiment. More patient exposure, more contact with lactation consultants. All right, so do you believe the rotation is beneficial? That one person, I think that was a different person though, who said no. So the large majority thinks this was a beneficial rotation for them and will continue to do so and would do it again. That one person though, I found out was someone who participated completely virtual. This was at the peak of COVID, 100% virtual. They did not find it beneficial to them. And overall rating, the large majority of our residents did rate this at a 5, with the others mostly at 4s. So I would say that they overall have a positive experience with the breastfeeding and nutrition rotation. So some of our takeaways and highlights, that overall our residents do have a positive experience and did provide us with positive feedback. The second point, more confidence with addressing common breastfeeding clinical scenarios, was echoed multiple times throughout the survey. We have increasing resident interest every year. So as I said, our incoming interns, we already have 4 out of the 6 who've already signed up for this rotation. So I anticipate that maybe we'll get all 6 this year, which is really exciting. We have conference participation. So down here on the bottom left, we have our course director, Dr. Marche Smith, with 2 of our graduating residents who participated in the 33rd annual breastfeeding conference hosted by Emory University and Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. That's also Dr. Smith on the right, presenting on breastfeeding documentation. And then at the top, we have our breastfeeding mothers who completed the rotation. That's me down there on the left. My co-resident on the second to the right, and then on the last picture is one of our current residents, and I think she was the one who talked about her breastfeeding journey. And then lastly, we have one IBCLC and one aspiring IBCLC who's standing in front of you. So we hope to accomplish that soon over the next year or so. So looking to the future, what are we planning to do? So I spoke with Dr. Smith about this, and I think in the next upcoming years, we want to incorporate the pre and post surveys for each rotation to better understand and assess resident needs, but also the needs of you guys like Rose and all other members of the community, to make sure that we're meeting everybody's needs and that we're doing the best that we can for our patients. More hands-on activities. So a lot of our residents don't really know much about breast pumps and how to utilize those. So they did mention they wanted that experience. So we want to provide them with that. And then incorporating more of the AAP breastfeeding curriculum. So right now, they do watch some of the AAP modules, but we also use things like healthychildren.org, some information from the World Health Organization. But I think Dr. Smith would like to incorporate more of the actual breastfeeding residency curriculum across the board. And then lastly, access to certification based on resident interest. So we have a couple other residents who mentioned wanting to be certified as IBCLC. So I know during this time period it's not possible to actually achieve that, but at least introducing the idea and presenting them with the resources that they need. So I wanted to thank Rose, my story, Dr. Bug. I decided to get pregnant during my second year of residency. This was the year after I completed the rotation. And lo and behold, I got pregnant with twins. Surprise, surprise, surprise. And I had them, Dr. Bug, when's your birthday? February. On my boy's birthday. I had my boys on Dr. Bug's birthday. No longer yours, I'm taking them. And I just remember, so this was peak of COVID as well. And my husband and I were by ourselves, and I was attempting to breastfeed, and I was just as lost as I could be. I learned everything I thought I could on the rotation, but it was rough. It is different. And I just looked at the text before I came up here. I texted Dr. Bug. I said, hey, can you talk? Talk to you now. I remember being in tears. And I was so grateful for the resource of Rose and Dr. Bug, truly.
Don't do this.
No, because seriously, you think you know something, and then you get there and you're like, I have no idea. And not only did this woman teach me almost everything I know about breastfeeding, but she also has twins. So I was really grateful for her as a resource. And I remember asking, could I call her? And she said, yeah, anytime. She meant that. Anytime I needed something from her, she answered the phone. She texted me back. She asked me who was the lactation consultant in the hospital because she wanted to know who it was and what's her name. And then I told her who it was. She said, oh, yeah, what is she? We OGs, I know her. And sure enough, you know, it's that kind of connection that we strive to make. And that's what it's all about. And I truly appreciate her. And she's done that for many of us. So I want to thank Rose for helping me on my breastfeeding journey. And if it wasn't for this rotation, I would not have that resource, and our patients would not have the resource either. So thank you very much for that. So now we have transitioned from breastfeeding to turkey wings and snow cones. But thank you for your role in helping us to get to where we are today. And thank you for allowing me to share this information with you.